Anyway, colleagues, I think we need to make a start. I'd ask those of you inside of here to take your seats, and if you can encourage those outside to come in. We're about to start the second roundtable discussion this morning. I need to follow the protocol and recognize in our presence here the Deputy Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. We have our Minister in the Ministry of Youth Education and Sport, is it, of Belize, who is here with us. Who else? Who are the other? Mr. Francis, have you taken the dive into it yet? Not yet. All right. I know certainly Jason has not yet. He's waiting for Mr. Stewart to pass over the baton. But yeah. But of course, I need to recognize here we have persons, long-serving directors of youth. There's a permanent secretary from Barbados, and of course, many of you young people who have been activists, who have been stalwarts in the movement, those using the traditional means of advocacy, those using new means of advocacy, like my comrade out there who's following in his father's footsteps as a regional integrationist. I need to recognize all of you here, Peter from RTI, our colleagues from DAI, you know, our own people here from on the ground in Jamaica. So before introducing the panelists, we had a very interesting discussion early on, the first roundtable, and so interesting was the discussion that looked like we didn't even remember that they had a break, and we really wanted to continue. So I think this afternoon, there is one of the group sessions that will be doing this. There are free meeting sessions taking place. You know, one of them, I think we'll get an opportunity to discuss a little more. So not all of you will have that opportunity because you might be in another group, but we'll discuss a little more about this youth policy thing and looking at it in the context of the power and power relationships and those things. There were a couple of things I could not let pass that came out this morning. One is somebody made a statement about we have strong democracies. And I remarked to myself quietly that it depends on what is your perspective of democracy. If you tell me that we have strong prime ministerial dictatorships or cabinet dictatorships in the Caribbean, I will say yes. I will say yes. Then there was a debate about bureaucracy and process, and our goodly brother was very diplomatic to say, you know, you have to follow the process sometimes. But I think what the point that was being raised, which confronts young people all of the time, if not most of them, not all of the time, is that there is this artificial, I call it artificial excuse that comes about when there are delays in delivering to young people. And I want to urge, although I know our politicians are a little more progressive than that, but I want to urge them to reflect on those things. Because you see, young people know that if somebody coming for a promise of $1 million investment in a suitcase, in a briefcase, that they come to invest in a factory, that the cabinet of ministers will suspend the rules and will give the approval in one sitting because Mr. He or Mistress She is important, they bring in an investment. And yet we tell young people, in order to get the playing field for them, it will take 10 years because we have to go through London survey, we have to go through this. So there's an issue, process is process, but there's the thing of bureaucracy on unnecessary delays and not prioritizing things that we sometimes cover up that by saying it's process. So that, you know, just let us get these things right in our mind. Now, we're talking about how relevant are the existing strategic frameworks. What are some of those strategic frameworks? You have, the UN has the World Programme of Action for Youth. Now we talk about the SDGs. Lynn, of course, from the Commonwealth, you have the Commonwealth Plan of Action for Youth. Now the Youth Development Index is coming on stream. The CARICOM has the CARICOM Youth Development Plan, Action Plan. What else? You have a few others that are around the place. Your own youth policy in your countries are in fact some kind of strategic framework that you're trying to take on. So essentially, what we expect our panelists here is to give us some indication of where they are in terms of the strategic frameworks and how relevant are those strategic frameworks in terms of integrating youth into the whole post-2015 youth development strategy, not just as a beneficiary, as what do they call it? As a spectator in the VIP stand, but as real participants in the process. And so to assist us with that this morning, we have first of all Nicola Shepard, who is the UN focal point on youth and also co-chair for the interagency network of youth at the UN. Then she'll be followed by Lane Robinson, who is at the youth division. Lane is a program director of programs at the youth division of the Commonwealth Secretariat. You have Mrs. Ildis Polak-Bigel, who is the deputy program manager for youth at the CARICOM Secretariat. You have Ms. Ashanta Osborne Moses, who is the youth commission chair for the International Federation of the Red Cross Red Crescent Societies. And of course, we have Mr. Timothy Ferdinand, who is the outgoing chairperson of the Caribbean Regional Youth Council. Each panelist will speak initially for 5 minutes. Then, at the end of this, we'll have a period of about 20 minutes for questions. And then we'll have a short period afterwards so that the panelists can come back and, and just reiterate certain points. So we'll start with Nicola, first of all, please.
Henry, do you know about the PowerPoints?
Who's doing the power? You're there? Okay, he's here. PowerPoint is here. Thanks.
Can you help me to put it on? I gave it to him. Sorry about that. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So as Henry mentioned, I'm the UN Focal Point on Youth from the UN headquarters in New York. And our roundtable today is what's on the agenda for youth. And Tarianne gave me a very big job. I'm not sure she has a lot of confidence in me. So she said, can you tell everybody what the World Program of Action for Youth is and what the Sustainable Development Goals are and how they relate together in 3 to 5 minutes. So they say Americans talk fast, so I'm going to try to talk fast and get through all of that in 3 to 5 minutes. Let me see how this clicker works. So some of the main challenges facing young people in the Caribbean, I think that you are much more aware of this than I am, but I just wanted to highlight a few of them. Are the things that we are addressing within the UN system, where obviously all over the world there's an issue of youth employment, particularly a lack of job creation for a variety of skill sets. We see a lot of young people from the Caribbean going overseas because they can't find jobs for the education that they've got here in the Caribbean region. There's a lot of overqualified youth, oversaturated sectors. I'm just talking generally about some of the main issues. Also climate change. That's a big issue for small island development states. We heard about some this morning from Aaron. You have issues of clean water and sanitation. Health is something we didn't touch on that much this morning, but in particular non-communicable diseases are a large issue in this region. We heard from Mr. Smith about juvenile justice a little bit this morning, and safety. That's another one. Education, of course, the school-to-work transition, an issue all over the world, and particularly here in the Caribbean. And then we've talked already a lot about youth empowerment and political inclusion. I think that youth in this region are really, really committed to this issue, and we need to see how we can integrate it more into our policies. So that's just kind of an overview of some of the issues that we're looking at. Now, generally for the UN, we define youth as 15 to 24, but we've talked a little bit about senior youth and junior youth, and I don't know where we all fit into that. So don't think that if you're not 15 to 24, this doesn't apply to you, because every country has its own definition. Even within the UN, some of the entities have different definitions of youth, but for statistical purposes, that's what we're talking about within the UN. So again, I'm going to talk about two main mandates. The first is the World Program of Action for Youth. Mr. Smith talked a little bit this morning about youth policies and how the UN is committed to this. And how we do that is through the World Program of Action for Youth. And people call it the YK. So it was adopted in 1995. We just celebrated 20 years. But that doesn't mean that it's not relevant today. It really should be the basis for developing national youth policies and international work on youth at all levels. And it's a guide for the development of these things. There are 15 priority areas for the World Program of Action for Youth. I put them on the screen here, and I want you to remember these because soon we're going to switch to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and then we're going to see how they relate to each other and why they're still relevant. Because the YPay is 20 years old, and there's a lot of things that you've heard about, a lot of ongoing plans, and people are saying, well, now we have the SDGs, we have the Sustainable Development Goals. Do we still have to care about the World Program of Action for Youth? Do we still have to implement that? And the answer is an unresounding yes, absolutely we do. So these are the Sustainable Development Goals. I think many of you are familiar with them. I don't have the time to go through them in detail, but what I'm going to just do is quickly try to show you why the World Program of Action for Youth is still a tool that we can use in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. So in order to do that, I just broke down some of the Sustainable Development Goals to see the link. So you know the first Sustainable Development Goal is to eliminate poverty. The second one is to eliminate hunger. Well, if you look at the World Program of Action for Youth, the slide with the 15 priority areas, the first priority area is hunger and poverty. But in there's guidelines specifically for addressing issues of hunger and poverty for young people. And obviously you can't reach the Sustainable Development Goals without specifically addressing the issues of young people. Okay, so she's telling me I have 1 minute left and I'm barely started. So I won't go through each and every one of these, but what I've done is broken down all the Sustainable Development Goals and shown how they do link to the World Program of Action for Youth. I'll skip to the part which may be most interesting for you, because this is how you can get involved with the SDGs right now. We're developing what's called the Partnership for the SDGs. It's an online platform encouraging everybody all over the world to get informed and to get involved in partnerships for the SDGs. It's open to the public and free. I can give you the link later. Right now we have a consultation seeking the views of everybody to see how they can get involved in this. Another thing is, if you are a young person under 30, you should know about the Major Group for Children and Youth. This is your constituency within the UN to get your voice heard on issues of youth development and sustainable development. You can ask me questions about it later. The Interagency Network for Youth Development is another instrument. And becoming a youth delegate. My time is up. Okay, I want to tell you one more thing. We are also developing a youth gateway for the SDGs. So it's going to be in partnership with a major group. It's a global youth partnership for the SDGs, so young people can really get involved in their implementation. I don't have time for all these other things. Okay, that's how you get in touch with us. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share in this discussion, this conversation about the relevance of the frameworks we have. I'm from the Commonwealth Youth Programme, from the Commonwealth Secretariat headquartered in London, and we work across 4 regions of the world: the Pacific, Africa, Asia, Caribbean, 53 countries. And the framework that we work alongside is the one called the Plan of Action for Youth Empowerment. It's a document, maybe you've received it through the emails, that has 13 priorities that we think, working in consultation with government, stakeholders, young people, that are critical for youth development to happen, youth empowerment to happen at a national level. Now, whereas you have some priorities that are fairly high level in terms of what they intend to achieve more globally, within the Commonwealth framework, our priorities are designed to help open up the youth development sector and allow development to happen so that the goals that Pub and Nicola mentioned can happen from the SDGs and so on. So in these 13 frameworks, you will have, for example, priorities that focus on the social, political, and economic empowerment of young people. But a step down, a little bit less, that focus on, for example, how to help youth ministries be more efficient in how they do their jobs. That's a very tangible, practical thing, which if you're not having that in place, you might have a challenge achieving some of the goals. Another one in this priority 13 deals, well, priority 12 deals with the professionalization of the youth work sector. You know, the youth work is a critical component of all that we are discussing here. But what is youth work? Who are the people who are working in youth work? Do they know, do they have the educational, the skills and the competencies to do a good job? Are the youth workers in the countries properly empowered to do their jobs as well? Are they recognized? So priority 12 here, again, very practical, very process-oriented, says, well, we need to do something with youth workers if they are going to work with young people to achieve the goals. And then I'll mention a third one, priority number 13, which deals with monitoring and evaluating progress along the plan of action, along these indicators. And one of the things that we have done working with this document is to create a youth development index, a global youth development index. That what it attempts to do is to measure progress against some of the goals that you would have heard mentioned. How do we make sure that showcase that youth development is happening? And while we had a global tool, what we have, based on the plan of action, decided to do is to then help countries build the capacity in how to measure progress on youth development at a national level. So in this region, we will be working with Barbados to see how we can help them make that a good example at country level. So how to measure youth development. So the plan of action is a tool, it's a guide, it's a resource for member states. While it sets a very big picture of what needs to be achieved across these 13 priorities, what it intends to do is to give governments the flexibility to adapt the strategy to fit their national contexts. So we don't advocate that the 13 priorities can be achieved in one go. We know development is essentially a national development issue. And so each country must define how the development will happen for them. The plan of action goes further. It articulates the principles and values behind youth work, which is absolutely important. That youth work is we appreciate a rights-based approach to youth work. That means young people have the right to education, the right to participate, the right to associate together in youth councils and youth groups. These are rights that they have. And this plan of action articulates and sets that out very clearly, that those rights should not be taken from young people, and they equally have the responsibility to fulfill them. The second thing that it does too, it sets out the principles and the approach to youth work. So youth work is a science. Youth work is a discipline. It should be recognized as such. And it's not just that we believe that anyone should just get in youth work. Youth work can be studied and understood and practiced in such a way as to deliver good results. And so the plan of action articulates how that should happen. Then the plan of action also says that youth development work should be focused on not as a deficit. We shouldn't see young people through the lens of problems and the challenges they have, but as assets to their society. And this is a very, very interesting point, thank you for sharing, that if we change the way we view young persons in our countries, then we can therefore open up the place for investments to happen. Because if you're only saying, oh, young people are crime and violence and teenage pregnancy, then that is a problem, and governments sometimes panic. But if you turn it around through the plan of action, which says that, no, young people bring great resource to a country, they can be you can invest in young people for the greater good, then that is what this plan of action advocates. And so in conclusion, we believe that the plan of action is one framework, and our critique for it is it has not been marketed enough. That's one thing. It's not, we have these wonderful documents, but nobody knows what's going on in them. The Commonwealth knows this. It's not enough. We don't see people taking it up and running with it as they should. That's a challenge. The second one is also, there are so many frameworks. There is this one. The CARICOM has one, there's the World Programme of Action, the AU has one. As we go across the world, the Pacific has one. There are so many frameworks now that countries now are challenged to be meeting the targets. Sometimes they feel that there's so much to do, and they get into a paralysis. And so one of the things we're advocating for, thank you, the time is up, is that we now begin to harmonize these frameworks. And so we want to work in partnership, and have been working in partnership with the UN and with CARICOM to see how we can have a common framework that lessens the burden on member states in how to implement and achieve the targets for youth development. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope we can have some good discussions in this conversation. Thank you.
While the technicians are busy to put up something interesting for you, I congratulate all young people, the older ones, the younger ones with today. It's on behalf of the CARICOM Secretary General, Ambassador Belinda. And as Lane, I will pick up on the point that Lane made last point, which is quite overwhelming for us as well as youth development work. There are different and many youth frameworks. And I think that when I view it, from my point of view, it should be a Caribbean-specific approach. Now we have SDGs. How do we make those SDGs Caribbean-specific? How do we make them relevant to what we are doing. And then when you drill down, you would say, how do we make the SDGs national specific, Jamaica specific, KIPS specific, and so on. So with that introduction, I am going to the CARICOM Youth Development Action Plan. Okay, they're ready. Okay, let's pause for what they will do for us.
Sit down. This one going up, sit down, please.
Young people with vision, we live on a mission. You're ready for action, building we region. I see that for it, I see that for it, I see that for it, I see that for it. Don't give up on me now, we going to the future. I see that for it, I see that for it, I see that for it, I see that for it. Now we stop the crime, now we stop the violence. Together we can do it. Now is the time to see that for it, 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 see that for it.
CDAP, CARICOM Youth Development Action Plan, Stop the Violence.
Well, the panelists want to dance actually. So we'll play the song after the session. But this is I think, a very good way in applauding what young people came up with in marketing the CARICOM Youth Development Action Plan. And as we celebrate youth, their development and their input, I think this was good to share with you. So the CDAP is nothing else than the CARICOM Youth Development Action Plan. And it is really resulting from research that was done based on a mandate we see from CARICOM heads of government. They simply said we need to know what young people feel, what they think, what we have to do for them as a region, and we have to focus into what they're saying to us. So the CDAP was really approved by Ministers of Youth in 2012 and is due to be revised in 2017. But as you know, we would have these different plans, but how do you then take it and make it a national priority? So the CDAP is really anchored in 6 CARICOM Youth Development Goals. And those goals were proposed by young people, right here in Jamaica, in fact, at the Courtney Hotel when we had a consultation with young people. And they said, well, we know of all these plans, we went this morning to it, there'll be another document that will go on the shelf, but what if we can have goals that we can hold our governments accountable to, that they can report to, that they can show progress on? And therefore the Secretariat decided to anchor the CDAP together with other stakeholders into 6 goals. And I think when I'm listening to Nicola and to Lane, we're talking the same story. It's just from a different level, point of view. So education and economic empowerment is one of the goals that is highlighted in the CDAP. And basically, the SDGs that are on the 2, 4, and 8 are really dealing with our education CARICOM Youth Development Goal. So when we're looking at the relevance of our CDAP and other plans, really are to look at how now can we take those SDGs and make it Caribbean specific and then bring it back to our national context. In the conclusion remarks, or concluding remarks, I would say that participation is critical, but participation does not start when you are asked to be part of a process. It starts with you being part of the thinking process, part of the implementation process, and part of the tracking process, a watchdog kind of role. So I think that in closing, we should say that monitoring and evaluation is important, and the CARICOM at the moment is looking at drafting a monitoring and evaluation plan, which will be presented to Ministers of Youth for their approval in November. So those were the key points.
Very good to be here in a room of youth and youthful people. want to talk a little bit, and hopefully the substance of my input here will come in the discussions to follow, about what we call the Youth Engagement Strategy in the International Federation. We do have a youth policy, and we deliberately kept it to one page. While policies are important, I have to agree with some of the speakers this morning that you can only do so much with them. And the more lengthy the more lengthy they are, the harder it is to really wrap our heads around how do we implement it. So we've tried to keep it at one page and focus instead on what we call youth engagement strategy. I'm aware of the fact that we're talking about youth development today. However, in our debates and consultations, taking in mind again the comments and consultation, and I want to assure you that I would like to think that we had genuine consultation, because this comes directly from our youth network, of over 7 million young people across the globe. We thought that we needed to speak a language that was more inclusive. We needed to speak a language that people cannot just go away thinking, oh, it's for the young people and therefore they have to do it, or it's only for them. We needed to speak a language that was empowering and really including an intergenerational sort of approach to where we want to go. And so in developing the youth engagement strategy, we focused on the fact that this is not only for young people, but for us to partner together with all of the stakeholders in all of the issues that regards youth. And so we talk about strong youth, and a lot of what I say will sound very much Red Cross, and we tend to have this sort of language of our own. But just to note that it is applicable in broader context. We looked at strong youth for strong national societies, and if you know anything about the Red Cross, we have a country office, if you will, in UN terms, in almost every country. And they are responsible for responding to the needs of their local society. So that differs in every country. We do have, the commonalities when we look at the Caribbean, Latin Americas, etc. So each national society has its own program. So for us, it's very difficult to come up with one strategy that covers everyone. So we focused on the principles of what it would be to engage young people in the work that we're doing. And so national societies now have a tool that helps them to look at what youth engagement means in their own local development, in strengthening themselves to be reliable, relevant partners and stakeholders in their country development. And so looking at, for example, the post-2015 era that we're entering into, some of the key questions we've asked ourselves as national societies is, are we ready to participate in where we're going? What are some of the gaps in terms of how we've engaged with key stakeholders? Are the communities we serve ready? Because we are very cognizant that accomplishing the SDGs is not a work for just governments. It's a work for all of us to put our hands in and accomplish our bits. And for us, community engagement and involvement is critical. How do we leverage both our strengths and capacity, but also facilitate the development process within the communities that we work? And so when in developing the youth engagement strategy, we focus on how we can develop a tool that will help national societies engage what is their greatest asset, if we're going to use that word, and that is the young people that come and go through our doors every day. And so we focus on education, empowerment, and enabling environments for young people to be engaged in the work of their national societies. These are words that I have noted reflect across all of the strategies that are being represented here today. And we also look at how we as Red Cross, but how governments, organizations, NGOs can really engage young people as leaders, both in the traditional sense, but also in non-traditional sense, as agents of change, as advocates, how we can focus on using beneficiaries as a part of the change process in their communities. We have excellent examples of how we have developed very strong neighborhood projects in, for example, communities with violence, and how we can use youth as volunteers in civic engagement in really changing their communities. So, in closing, yes is just not a strategy for youth, but for us all, and how we can engage young people in the development that we're all focused on and talking about here in these days. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning again. I will be speaking from the perspective of national youth governance networks and structures. The question is, how relevant are the existing strategic frameworks which will guide youth post-2015? For us as NYCs and advocacy organizations, all frameworks apply to us. So whether it's from the UN or the Commonwealth, whatever is out there, we embrace. So the question at the end of the day for us is, what do young people really, 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 really want? And how do we get it to them? And in retrospect, or in looking at the entire landscape of youth development and advocacy, I would say young people really want, like we mentioned earlier, a good succession plan. We just want to inherit something good. We want an environment that is prepared, or something we can use, something we can add our value to. Now, the frameworks that exist, which have been presented earlier, including the SDGs that was recently adopted, that in itself is just one. These things are global or international tools that are put together by member states or countries as policy documents, but it does not guarantee anything in particular. It is there as a benchmark or standard, but it does not literally guarantee anything. So what I want to do today to reinforce that is to just read through a couple of declarations, because quite apart from those particular frameworks, there have been several meetings held by heads of states and governments, and at the end of these meetings, declarations are produced. And I think they are very, very, very relevant. There's no doubt about it. To show you how relevant they are, I'll read from as far back as 1965, when the whole issue of youth development first came on the scene, you see. The Declaration of the Promotion among Youth of the Ideals of Peace, Mutual Respect and Understanding between Peoples, 1965, by the United Nations Convention for the United Nations General Assembly. That document, out of that document came what we know as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. That convention has a particular article in 12.1 that states, parties shall assure to the child who is capable of forming his or her own views the right to express those views freely in all matters affecting the child, the views of the child being given due weight in accordance with the age and maturity of the child. That's way back. Now, building on this, there was the momentum of youth development and youth inclusion and participation that the United Nations began pushing. So I will take you to 2008 in what is called in fact, let's go to 2006, the 6th Commonwealth Youth Ministers meeting in Nassau, Bahamas. Its final communique article, number 13. It says the meeting commended member governments for the tremendous strides made in implementing national youth policies and encouraged those governments which have not yet done so to implement national youth policies. The meeting acknowledged that together with the existence of national youth councils, youth policies significantly accounted for building fundamental youth capacity, youth leadership, democracy, advocacy, and positive youth participation and engagement. That's one declaration. In 2008, the very same Commonwealth Youth Ministers meeting, Article 13, arising out of the recommendations to the CYMM, ministers noted the need for greater monitoring, evaluation, and reporting on progress made in youth development. The meeting agreed on the need for CYP to develop a model to guide the establishment of national youth councils and agreed that consideration should be given to creating more opportunities. There was one held in 2009 in Trinidad. There was a declaration of Paramaribo that Eunice spoke of, where CARICOM heads declared the full conviction of the benefits to be derived from institutionally strengthening and raising the profile of departments responsible for youth affairs, national youth councils, the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors Program, and other youth governance structures. And I have a whole list, that's part of my paper for Friday, that I'll be presenting. There's a list, so many, and they are so well articulated. We know exactly what we want, we know exactly what we need for young people. The last one I'll mention is that in Australia, the declaration that was agreed upon, there was a clause that said, subject to financial limitations. Member states are encouraged to X, Y, and Z. So the thing we are all evading is how do we raise the money we need to make the things happen? And for me, relevance of the strategic these frameworks, it is relevant. So the issue is not the framework, but how do we utilize the framework for effective implementation? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have heard the panelists. They have given you a kind of synopsis, really. A synopsis of a synopsis, really, of what are some of the frameworks that they work with, and they also particularly interested in what Tim was saying is an issue that young people keep talking about. You know, whether those things are not just Christmas cards, just to say we send a card, and how serious they are. And perhaps they might have even missed the first one in 1945 when the young people met at the World Youth Forum in London on November the 10th, and a major statement calling for the end of the atrocities of World War II, and young people wanted to play a role. So these are some that we need to look at. We talked about procedures and process earlier, so I want to start this session, the question session, or the commentary session, by giving an opportunity to our distinguished colleagues, the Minister of State or Minister in the Ministry and our Deputy Chief Minister, to make a short comment, ask a question, officially on what is being discussed. Please. We oblige you.
Thank you so much, my good friend. All this is quite interesting, and one of the things that really jump out at me is we've spoken earlier of the contribution of young people. We're now speaking of frameworks. What is critical, and it's basic for me, I am the minister and it's really simple for me. What is critical is how do we bring every single person to the table and keep them there. That is extremely important. We talk a lot. We talk a lot, but how do we get everybody to the table? How do we get young people to stay committed? How do we get adults to recognize the value of listening to young people? Because we don't do that as adults. We refuse to do it. How do we do that? So I think it boils down to simple things. How do we, in our own persons, figure out how to make it work? And I think I can't be more simple than that. That is what I want to contribute today. Each of us should think about that. And each of us should try to find a way to make it happen so that we can stop talking and start acting. Yes.
Good morning to everyone. I don't know if I need to extend greetings in that you have already done so. But greetings certainly on behalf of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. The sessions this morning thus far have been quite informative. In particular, in St. Kitts and Nevis, we do not have a national youth policy. And for me, it is one of the things which I intend to sort of leave as one of my legacies, having demitted office or perhaps being a minister in a different ministry. So it's something we are working on. Hence the discussion this morning about the National Youth Policy and the lessons, the experiences which persons would have had thus far in developing their own National Youth Policy has been very informative for me. I certainly hope that we can avoid some of the pitfalls which have been experienced in other Caribbean islands. To take 8 years to put a National Youth Policy in place is indeed a rather long time. However, I do understand though, is some of the issues which are involved. It's sometimes not easy getting young persons to take part in discussions which are relative to the very same young people. You find that in many instances, as pointed out by one of the speakers this morning, you tend to get the very same persons making contributions over and over again. I think it's not only a challenge for government, but it's a challenge for young people themselves, because as much as possible you would want to motivate and encourage your own peers to get involved in issues which directly affect them. Young persons also need to recognize that, as something I saw on the screen earlier, you basically have the power in your vote. The majority of persons who vote are actually young persons, and sometimes, yes, it is difficult to even get them registered because they get turned off. But you can only hold politicians accountable to a large extent by letting them know that indeed you have the power to make a difference, you have the power to determine whether or not they will be in office for a next election. And so young persons need to actually rise to the occasion. I think I have a distinct and unique privilege in that I'm the minister with responsibility for education, youth, sports and culture. And so if you sort of marry those things together, you get an opportunity to actually speak to young persons on different platforms and in different means and ways. As it is, there is no policy for sports, there is no policy for culture. As a nation which just celebrated 32 years of independence, it therefore means that we have quite a bit of work to do with regards to our young people. But we are up to the task, and I look forward to all of the discussions which will ensue over the next 2.5 days, as it has been enlightening thus far, and I expect to get even more information which will guide me. I've only been the minister with responsibility for youth for approximately 7 months now. So it's a new experience, and the experience of others will indeed help to guide me during the process. As such, I want to say thanks to all of the young people who are here. I expect to hear from all, if not most of you, with your different experiences. And I'm certain that other persons here, the other minister from Belize, is also looking forward to your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for the endorsement that you have given to the conference. Now the floor is open generally. Questions, comments? Nick Francis, and then you next, right? Nick Francis, and followed by the young lady.
Hi, good afternoon. I just wanted to, Mr. Ferdinand mentioned something that is so on par with the things that I've been dealing with. Is there's so many frameworks in place right now that we're trying to operationalize, but it's difficult because, lack of funding and so on. And another issue I wanted to raise in terms of consultation with young people. You mentioned earlier that sometimes you end up having the same young people over and over again coming to these consultations. And part of that is that our scope is not wide enough. And I mentioned this in my paper with there's this sort of social elitism and academic elitism in these quarters that we feel that because somebody who is on this side of the road or who is in the ghetto, who might not be able to articulate a point, but still has a lot of information that is important to us delivering services. And I think we have to broaden our scope. We have to include these young people. We have to go to the places where they are and listen to them and hear from them. And we have to turn these consultations into something more informal so that they will not feel intimidated to come and express themselves and express their views. Thank you.
My name is Isabel Dennis. There are two things that I want to kind of point out. The first is we've been talking about young people as a cohesive group of one young person, and we're acting like they are all the same. Now, if we were to like pretend and say, we're talking about an old people's policy or an old people's national thing, obviously questions will come up as to, all old people are not all the same. So then how are we taking that into consideration when we talk about youth policies and when we talk about youth on a whole? How do we take that into consideration? And not every youth is the same. The other thing I wanted to point out is it's been raised twice this morning and it's sort of hitting a nerve by me, which is how do we expect young people, and I'm using young people broadly, but how do we expect young people to rise up to the occasion and to take their role in society if for the first 18 years we have been telling them exactly what to do? From the get-go, from the time they're born, we tell young people how to behave, what to do. We have to socialize them, and it's the adult's job to do so. But then at 18, if we even take it back to school, at 17 we're in school, young people have to raise their hands to use the bathroom. But then at 18, when they finish school, we expect them to vote. And we expect them to take their rightful place in society. And so how is that? How do we navigate that?
I'm back. I just wanted to ask a few pointed questions, especially after the young gentleman came up and spoke about how do you get to the persons in the lower echelons of society. And I have three questions, and the first two will be pointed to Ms. Nicola Shepherd and Ms. Ashanta Osborne Moses. My first one is, how do you guys, pardon if you're, I'm not trying to offend you, how do you include social entrepreneurship in the implementation of everything that you do? And I heard one of the speakers spoke to the country team. Then I actually saw in Miss Nicole Shepherd's presentation about gender, and then I saw girls. I'm a young man. I would like to think that I have a gender. Especially in light of the fact that for Jamaica, the education system, and I'm a tutor, so I can speak very directly to this. The education system in Jamaica, whilst being very good, fails our young men and boys. Because I now have I have the distinguished pleasure of tutoring both young men and boys, and also young women and girls. And often my challenge is teaching the young boys and the young men and trying to bring them to the same level as each other. And I usually have to expend a lot of energy more for the young men and boys. I usually have that difficulty on that side. And so when you speak to gender equality just does not only speak to women and girls. So I take that to heart very much, especially in the environmental sector. I have great difficulty in energizing young men. Luckily, I got exposed to half my class were young men. So I take pain when I see presentations having only young girls and women in speaking about gender. Really? Sorry, I get very emotional when men are silent, because from time to time I see good fathers, which are not spoken about. Even though I live in a matriarchal society where mostly single parent mothers are predominant. But I also have the pleasure of living in a garrison community where I see proud fathers taking care of daughters and sons. So sorry if I sound a bit passionate. My last question in relation to the young man's question is really and truly going back, how can we interrelate social entrepreneurship at the community-based organization level? Because I'm a part of my local community development committee, and it's very scary to engage UN on anything because we're just a simple grassroots committee, and I'm just a block coordinator. I'm not in the executive, and it's really scary. And a lot of them are looking to me to engage because I am Adrian Watson. I am the national coordinator of CYM Jamaica. I have the title. Titles are null and void if I don't have the capacity to engage you, or I don't have a link to engage the bigwigs.
Let me get people to answer these specific questions.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much, Adrian, for those excellent questions. Aaron or Adrian? Adrian, yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, so just to quickly respond, the first one was social entrepreneurship. Absolutely, we are including entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship in the programs for youth. However, there's an important note, I think, to say that one thing that the ILO, the International Labour Organization, has made clear within the UN system is that it's not. While we encourage entrepreneurship and want governments to do that, we also don't like the idea that a lot of governments are saying, fine, well, all young people just be entrepreneurs, and we don't need to have a diverse labor market where jobs are provided in addition. So it can't just be focused on entrepreneurship, but we also need to have a robust labor market as well. So it has to be a balance. Regarding the gender thing, I absolutely get your point. The World Program of Action for Youth was adopted in 1995. The words are sometimes a little bit old. Like, for example, the priority areas, one is girls and young women. Another one, it used to be called like drug abuse or juvenile delinquency. And so, whereas the word at the top may seem insensitive, if you read the details, it does address the issues of boys. And even now, I mean, in New York, everybody's talking about even gender itself is a fluid concept. Are there only males and females? We're not going to get into that discussion today. But so the whole issue of gender is quite interesting, and it's definitely on the top of everybody's minds.
I think I will prefer to do the rest of the question.
Okay, so let's say the rest of the question.
I just wanted to give Adrian a response based on his social entrepreneurship question. Yes, at the moment, actually, I'm hoping to wrap up with very fast so that I can go back to the Ministry of Youth, because we're implementing CBO, which is a Creativity for Employment and Business Opportunity, community-based social entrepreneurship program. And we're having 6 or I think 9 young persons drafting their business plans to be presented to possible seed funders. So if you are really willing, I think you can contact the Ministry of Youth, who we recently assisted 2 weeks or so ago with a training in national trainers to implement the CBO project so that you can have it in your community. So there is a CARICOM entrepreneurship program, and you can also call on us. Okay? And as it relates to your question in terms of the education system, the minister is here from St. Kitts, who has chaired the Commission on the Human Resource Development Commission. And this commission has as a task to present a strategy to revamp our education system. And this is very well one of the issues that is on their plate, and young people will be part of the process through your CARICOM Youth Ambassadors in Jamaica, because they will have to lead the youth cause in this process. You can get your input to them. So Andre and Teresa, I don't know if you know them, but find them and you can link with them. Okay?
Yeah, Terry and Tabari.
just one comment and then one question for everyone on the panel. If you go to the conference website and you look on the menus on the left, you'll see a menu item called Agendas for Youth. And what Tahiri and I did trying to prepare for this session was trying to map all these different agendas one against each other. We don't know if we've got it right. We've just sort of, in our own minds, tried to understand how they're all related, because I think that is key, and that's what I heard you saying in your discussion, that we shouldn't treat these as individual silos, but it's really an overarching approach to work with you. So I encourage everyone to look at this document. It's very colorful, and it seeks to map all the issues across the agendas. And if you have any comments, please just let us know and we'll update it. But this could then be made available to everybody to use as you move forward. And then my question is on monitoring and evaluation. How are these agendas monitored? How do we know what's happening? How do we find out whether we're achieving the goals or not achieving the goals? For me, on the MDGs, I was a student at the time, and when the MDGs came about, I heard a lot about it. And then I never heard anything until we started to talk about the SDGs, or prepared for the SDGs. And then suddenly people started to tell me, we're falling behind on this, we're doing well on this. But in between, I had no idea what was happening. How do we actually monitor these agendas?
No, yes.
Yes.
So that's the last question, and then we'll allow the panelists to make a final comment in which they answer the two last questions.
No problem. I have what I believe is a very simple question. I think I know what the answer may be, but I still want to put it out there to the panel. Concerning these frameworks and moving forward, I would like to know whether there's any discussion or initiative for future frameworks to include expertise. So don't just send the document, send the persons with the capacity to make them work. Whether they're going to include funding, because these documents come out and ministries are already cash-strapped and challenged financially with making these documents work. And whether they are going to include toolkits, real action plans for breaking down these documents, especially the Commonwealth document is a brilliant document, a paying document, but I think a toolkit that a government can take or a youth organization can take and really decipher the document and make it work at a practical level is necessary. So I'm wondering if moving forward we're considering adding those things along with future frameworks and agendas.
Cliff, what you wanted to?
Yes. I just want to ask a simple question from the point of view of a practitioner.
Yes.
And one of the concerns or one of the issues that has come up, I think it's pretty much pointed out in all the regional frameworks, is that collaboration, the whole partnership between the agency, the implementing agency, and young people. And I just want to put a challenge also to the young people too, because one of the things that you see that's common across all of the frameworks is that whole concept of the National Youth Council and the engagement of the National Youth Councils in terms of being able to disseminate the information to their stakeholder agencies. And I just want to put this also the challenge in terms of on two levels. One is what is the ourselves as administrators in the frameworks putting in place in order to ensure the strengthening and the survival of our national councils. And the second thing I want to ask, and this is a challenge also to the young people, what are the young people themselves doing to ensure that they have strong, vibrant councils in order that the information in national policies and so on can be disseminated to their stakeholders? So those are the questions. Thank you.
So now, the good news is you'll get to hear your panelists again, each of them 2 minutes to conclude. The bad news is we'll take it from your lunchtime. All right? All right. The good news.
Now I don't want to hear what we have to say. Okay. We can talk. I showed you I can speak quickly, so I'll keep it up.
2 minutes to wrap up.
Monitoring of the SDGs, Terry Ann. Believe me, everybody in New York is fighting over indicators right now. There's a very complex system being set up at the global level, and then we're taking it to the regional and national level, where you even have national level indicators. So don't worry, it'll be monitored. The question is, when will the system be in place? I know that even in the Caribbean region, there was a meeting where they have already said that there are 12 of the SDGs that they think are the priorities of the region, and I can share that information if wanted. Just wanted to follow up on the whole discussion of youth policies this morning and some of the questions. And we had a workshop, some of the participants are here today, in Barbados in June, a great workshop. And it was about developing, implementing, and monitoring, evaluating youth policies. And now as an outcome of that workshop that was done with CARICOM and Commonwealth and other UN entities, we're going to have a state of youth policy in the Caribbean, and we've been in touch with all of the directors of youth in the Caribbean and really looking at that. So we're working on that. But I think that's an example of when we're talking about all these different frameworks and everybody kind of working in silos. I think that workshop and that continued work is an example of what we can call the 3 C's that we need. First is communication. The fact that we are all even here today and discussing this is important. Coordination is another thing. I mean, we coordinate all the UN's work on youth at the global level, and we need to do more of that outside of the UN with these other frameworks. And then finally, commitments. And I know we have a lot of commitment here in the room today, but how we can all make sure that we don't just have another talk shop and move forward, that's what we need to see. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the questions. So a couple of them that I don't want to miss. The question about the money that Timothy raised, and I really don't think it's about the money only. I think there's a lot of a need for political will. And I give some examples here. For years, we tried to get a youth degree into the University of West Indies because we believe that development was so important. So if it is so important, why is it not in the academia? And we worked so hard to get it in. There's only 2 or so years ago that the Open Campus, working with the Commonwealth and other partners, agreed to have a degree in youth work that is now available for any person treating youth work as a science that can be studied and implemented. And that's progress, but I'm saying to you, that didn't cost a lot of money to do, but the impact you can see in every Commonwealth Caribbean country, people could do study. And the same goes for a number of things that we have. You know, to get the will to have an acceptance of a Caribbean Regional Youth Council. Heads can agree that you need this council, a youth ambassadors program. They can agree these things and support them. And I don't think all the time it's just about the money, it's about just working together and the will to do it. And I believe some of those things can take off with that at the beginning. The question about how do we get these persons together, it's a good question, and I don't think the question is probably the right question, because we can't get everybody on the table. That's my opinion. You know? I think we have to work with representative structures. So if I should put some recommendations to you, what I would say is countries need, they need to have a national youth policy that has been really consulted. And it doesn't mean I don't even have every single young person, but you should be consulted, get all the groups involved, your church groups, your cadets and so on, get everybody at the table. You need to have some national youth council in place. So if you have a legitimate national youth council in place that represents the views of young people and bring young people together, if that's not in place as well, you need to have youth workers who are properly trained. So I'm saying if you're going to make this thing work, there's some things you must do, and that's what the plan of action identifies, and you must monitor those processes, and you must bring other partners to the table, the CSOs, the church groups. Others are there working, or we work alongside these. So I don't think you need to bring everybody to the table, but there are a few simple things we can do and be consistent in doing them, and we'll make a great impact, I think, for young people. Very quickly, they said the time is up, about the tools and the frameworks. Yes, so monitoring the plan of action, the real purpose of the YDI was to monitor the plan of action. So we realized that you can't have a plan without a monitoring framework. It took a while, but that is the purpose of this tool. Now the next step is then to help countries with tools, Tavari, to do that at national level with their policies. How do we help to do that? And we have a range of tools actually to evaluate national youth policies. There's a tool for that, to manage, to evaluate the capacity of youth ministries, to implement programs. We have a tool for those things. There's the youth degree to help youth workers strengthen their capacity. So there are a range of tools. What is missing is the commitment to access them and to get involved and to use them. I think I have one last point, if I may, very quickly, in the time that we have, about the harmonization. I really believe that we need to harmonize these frameworks. And I'm very happy that what has been done so far. We have a really specific project to harmonize these, and very shortly we'll bring together some of the other regional partners to look at how do these partners come together. Actually, if you look at this document, it expires 2015, the plan of action, and we had a real challenge. Do we have another one come out? Or do we say, no, we don't need this one? let us then work with others in partnership to deliver progress for you. And so we have put this one aside and agree that what we will do is work with CEDAW, work with the Pacific, bring AU, work with all of these partners together and look at what is common and support member countries to implement these in a real, tangible, practical way. Thank you very much.
Well, on the point that you raised, Tarian, regarding the MNE, the CARICOM Secretariat is really working hard with member states and young people to draft a MNE plan. We're in the stages that we are now ready to present it to directors of youth in a final form and fashion, and also to ministers. So hopefully in November, after the meeting with ministers in November, we will have a definite monitoring and evaluation plan, which will include indicators for each goal and benchmarks that member states will agree on and will also make sure that they report against when it comes to the national development on date. The discussion about the toolkits, the CEDAW itself, it is structured in such a way that we have an implementation plan that is also being prepared to be presented to COSOC, as well as a communication plan and the MNE plan. The Council for Human and Social Development, which is the ministerial meeting, and this will be the toolkit that we will present to member states. So that is also something that we are looking at strengthening member states at that level, and then the whole issue of stakeholder partnership and collaboration. Whoever knows me knows that I'm big on networking and on collaboration, and I think this is excellent. It's an excellent gathering for us to again reiterate our commitment to work together. And to the question that the minister raised, I believe, coming from the ropes as a young person, being here where I'm sitting today, it's really about listening and wanting to give young people a floor, a role, believing in them, and then you see them flourish, and you see them contributing to development, and you see them really making that input that they really long to make. So to me, it is not that difficult to get them involved and to keep them engaged, but there is a certain level, I think Giselle said it this morning, about commitment and really trusting and wanting young people to be at that level. And on the other side as well, young people have a responsibility, because most of them are, let me say most of them, often we find out that young people are also in it for themselves. So what about those that are really behind them in the communities that they're representing? So they would go to these conferences. When they go back, nobody hears about them or hears about what happened at the conference. So there is a mutual role for us as policymakers, but also for young people to be a good advocate, but not just one, but one with the heart at the right place and walk the talk as you talk the walk. Yes, thank you.
In my experience, young people are interested, they're passionate, they have a lot to say. What they're not interested in is coming to these formal spaces, doing the consultation as we design them and saying the things we want to hear in the way and in the time we want them to say it. And that's often where the disappointment and the disillusionment comes from, because we cast our own expectation on young people and how they must behave. Thank you so much for the question about how do we expect young people to transition from the formal schooling we give them, both in our homes and in the formal system, into being these dynamic leaders and advocating for all of the many issues. And so we find ourselves in a bit of a conundrum. One, where the spaces we create are not conducive to the kind of engagements we're looking for. So we really need to be honest and open about, are we creating the enabling environments to allow young people to give voice to their issues and concerns, to make input into the development plans, strategies, policies that we're developing. As someone said, we can't expect young people to come to us. We have to go to them. So if they're on the street corners, then our consultation needs to take place on the street corners. If they're on the ball field, then that's where we need to go. So if we're not seeing the kind of feedback and involvement that we're hoping for, then we really need to take a critical look at what are the methodologies we're using to engage young people. Someone also mentioned, the gender imbalance and gender equality and gender equity I would like to add. And the first thing that came to mind is, for us in this region, that's a big one, because we have laws which are not friendly towards any gender outside of the male-female specification. So how do we even begin to talk about gender in a comprehensive sense? And so in designing our strategies or framework, we also need to make the space for communities, for groups, for organizations to define what gender means in their context and respond to the issues in that regard. Keeping in mind that for some places this is going to be a huge challenge that needs to be overcome from a national policy level, much less an implementation level. And the last thing I appreciate the question around in putting in place these policies and frameworks and strategies. Are we making available the resources, the tools, how do we do it? And this is a big question we had when we were developing the youth engagement strategy. And so the second part of our work right now is actually putting those things in place, a mapping of what are the success stories, a mapping of the challenges, a mapping of what resources, investing in leadership, both in the formal and non-formal sense. So we are cognizant that to be successful at this, we also need to build capacity. So it's not just about developing the tool or the document, but it's about building the capacity around that framework. So that's where we are right now.
Tim? One statement and one analogy. The statement is that I believe that national youth councils and student councils sort of structures are the best structures we have to capture or ensure participation of young people. The analogy is that when it comes to money, I've said it before, if you look at the private sector, that is the most powerful and the most successful sector in human development, in my opinion. Very successful because they have mastered the art of human psychology. And they know how to convince us to believe what we don't even want to believe. To make us eat the things we should not eat. And they make profit off of that success. And they finance political campaigns, they finance governments, they keep the country together in terms of the different sectors. On the side of government, however, if you want to get something done, don't you have to invest in it? If you want to get to all young people, all you have to do is look at how digital does it. Look at how the private sector gets things done. And at the end of the day, we realize that it comes down to where you spend your money and how you allocate your funds. To implement the policy, you mentioned the curriculums and so on. We all know what we want, but we have to admit that the resources we need to get done is either being spent or we don't have it. And if we don't have it, how do we invest to get the resources we need financially, especially to have young persons or to create an environment for growth in the region? So we national councils, we young people, we don't just advocate because we just want things. We really want a better economy, we want a better life, a better country, essentially. And so I think we should really put a challenge out there and try to figure out how do nations refocus, reinvest in the things that really matter. Thank you very much.
And of course, as we're about to close, just to say that there's one omission in the beginning I forgot. The brother has something he says that he asked for the permission to mash up the place. I forgot to ask or to give you the permission to be politically incorrect. And I'm deliberately saying that because we were given a charge this morning by some of the open statements people. And as we go about making those valuable inputs and contributions and clarifications. Let us be politically correct in the sense that what is not working, what is just mama guy, let us say it is mama guy. I am very worried. You see, everybody is applauding that all the world leaders have met in New York and they celebrated the SDGs. I am not necessarily encouraged, but I'm frightened. Because when every single world leader supports something, there is something about that thing that is in it there. Yes, I do. And I'm saying that because I've been around long enough to know some of the major global commitments that have been made at forums. The World Conferences, the World Social Development Conference, the Beijing Conference on Gender, all those things. All of those documents are languishing and they have not been implemented. You know why? Because all of them, if they were implemented, they would have transformed. What world governments will collectively support is what will only ameliorate the hurt, but not transform the environment. As you go for lunch, think of that when you come back.